Minister James Bezan is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence. Jack Harris is the NDP's defence critic, and Joyce Murray is the Liberal defence critic. Thanks for being here. There are bells going on. That means in about 11 minutes and 50 seconds, these three MPs have to get back in to have this vote on the controversial anti-terror bill. So we'll get you out of here. Defence Minister Jason Kenney repeated that he's open to expanding the combat against ISIS in Libya and Syria. James Bezan, can you give us details how seriously the government is considering that expansion?
Well, we've taken our responsibilities in the fight against the Islamic State quite serious, and we are talking to our coalition partners as we're evaluating our current mission and what motion we want to bring before the House, if we did make the decision to extend or expand the mission. But I think the minister was quite clear that there is this threat that seems to have spread, and we aren't going to sit on the sidelines. We're going to be engaged. We believe that we have a role to play. It's just a matter of how we decide to go forward with this based upon our capabilities and where we want to focus our resources.
So I mean, when I hear you, I mean, this is a very serious expansion. Canada was part of the coalition that bombed Libya in 2011. John Baird at the time said, we're going to help the Libyans transition to democracy. It didn't work. Charles Bouchard, the Canadian general who led the air mission there, was on this program, and he said we left Libya too early. Libya is now a failed state. It's a splinter place. Al-Qaeda and, of course, ISIS are there. I guess the question is, it's one thing to bomb places. It's another thing then what happens to them? What lessons has this government drawn from the mission in Afghanistan, the American experience in Iraq, and our experience in Libya, all of which have been, at best, muted success in Afghanistan, and in the case of Libya, much worse?
Well, we're looking at new threats, new challenges right now, and that's what Cabinet has to consider. That's what Department of National Defence and Foreign Affairs are making some evaluations on to make recommendations up to Cabinet. And so, we do, although no decision has been made, we are looking at all options. We are talking to our allies in the coalition, and we are looking at how we contain this crazy genocidal organization who continue to not just massacre people in their path, but threaten Canada as well. So
has any, just quickly, has any ally formally asked Canada to go into Libya and or Syria?
Well, as you know, there's just discussions at this point in time. Everybody's looking at what is happening. There was the meetings last week that our Chief of Defence Staff, General Lawson, attended. And so from that, there of course is takeaway discussions and ideas that then have to filter through all our respective governments within the coalition.
Jack Harris, what do you make of when you hear Jason Kenney and Mr. Bezan talking about the government evaluating where it can go and what it can do against ISIS in places like Iraq, Syria, and Libya?
Well, frankly, I'm quite amazed that Mr. Kenney, after being a defense minister for 2 weeks, is openly musing about a very expanded military mission. All options on the table. You wouldn't know, but he was President Obama deciding the future of the world, unless it is, as some of your commentators said, just for domestic purposes. I mean, it is quite astonishing when we've got 6 jets there in a very small part of Iraq with a limited mission, already prescribed by the Prime Minister because of the situation in Syria, to be musing about this. It is quite astonishing, frankly, and it seems to be a willingness by this minister and the government to sleepwalk Canada from a 30-day mission to a full-year mission to some sort of all-out involvement in something that I don't think Canada really has a part in.
All right, let me bring in Joyce Murray. Your reaction to Jason Kenney's comments?
He was clearly floating a trial balloon. I don't think it's responsible to be doing these kind of hints on the media, leaks to the press, one thing or another, speculation. Really, we have a mission in front of us right now. Should there be a change that the government wants to propose, they need to bring it to Parliament with a motion. We haven't seen that motion. So I think this is an irresponsible way to posture to get some coverage and some attention on the new minister. Evan, I want to reinforce that the Liberals have been supportive of being part of a coalition to address this threat that is ISIS in Iraq, and we are going to take a look at the whatever proposal the government brings forward. They need to be responsible in how they do it, and they should not forget that there are some very expert critics at this point on the capacity of the government to actually do more. Because of the budget cuts and the failures to replace equipment, the government's being accused of having a very degraded readiness and capability to do more than they are currently committed to.
Let's focus, and we'll get another discussion. There's real procurement questions, and I appreciate that. But Mr. Bezan, both the opposition parties, at the very beginning of the mission in Iraq, were asking about mission creep. You start with one thing and you get more. Those questions on the training revolved around what the special forces were doing when they exchanged fire with ISIS. Now you do have, it's fair to say, the defense minister openly musing about expanding the mission to Syria and not ruling out Libya as well. Isn't this exactly what the opposition was worried about, slowly creeping towards an expansionist combat mission?
Look, Canada historically has always stepped up and carried their load. And so if you want to look back over history, if we would have sat back and not engaged, who knows how some of these world conflicts would have ended.
So that, but you and I both know that's not the way to base it. I mean, Canada didn't go into the Iraq conflict, and that's widely hailed as a smart decision, even by your own government.
We're facing a different threat.
And how did Libya work out for us?
We're facing a different threat, and let's just be clear here, Evan, that the opposition, especially the Liberals, like to doublespeak on this. They haven't voted for the mission. Definitely, all the signals we're getting from them is that they won't. The NDP haven't supported it. There is this genocide taking place. ISIS is a threat to us here in Canada. We have to step in and do the responsible thing. But at the same time, no decisions have been made. We are just looking.
You love to talk tough. You know, it's like Mr. Harper talking about Putin. We're taking on Putin. Well, we're not taking on Mr. Putin. And, you know, the situation in Iraq, and Evan, you talked about, do we have a responsibility in Libya? Yeah, we have a responsibility in Libya. We don't own Iraq in the way that the Americans own it for what they did and left a vacuum afterwards. There was a vacuum left in Libya. Canada was a part of that. We warned about that, but when they changed the mission away from protecting people who were in danger to regime change and getting rid of Gaddafi and leaving that vacuum, that's what we're dealing with now. That was the creation of ISIS. Now, it's certainly a problem, but what exactly Canada can do here is not go holus bolus and say we're going to take on the rest of the world.
Well, Evan, my frustration is that after 14 years in politics, I have never seen a government take something that is as important as taking the country to war and putting soldiers' lives at risk, take something that is that important, and then manipulate public opinion about it, misinform what other parties are doing. Everything that they're doing is about votes, and they simply can't be trusted. Starting with when the Prime Minister said that we were asked to do more in Iraq, and then the Americans said, well, no, actually, the President asked us. I mean, there's been a litany of misinformation for political gain by the Conservative government, and I think it is completely unacceptable.
I'm letting you go before your whips come out and take you back in, because you got about 3 minutes before you have to vote on the anti-terror bill, C-51, second reading vote. These 3 MPs have to get back in there. Those are the bells you hear in the background. So I've got to, unfortunately, invoke some closure on this debate, so you can go and vote on that. I appreciate it. Thanks, all 3 of you.
Thank you, Evan.
Thank you.